Hello and welcome back. It is now 2016. I am the Beardly Gentleman from Central Ontario, Canada, and thank you for joining me today for the next installment in my Drinking the Middle Shelf Whiskey Review series. And today, the dram that we shall be talking about is Crown Royal Black. Now, it's the early weeks of January. It is quite cold out here in my sunroom right now. It is about minus 15 degrees Celsius, which I believe is 5 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. I always get to thinking about this whiskey around this time of year because this is my father's favorite, and I always make sure to buy him a bottle for Christmas. So I figured, why not do a review of it? Also, if I haven't mentioned before this video gets out, I hope all of you had a happy holiday and a Merry Christmas, and I hope all the best to you in 2016. So, I've already covered one offering from Crown Royal. I've done their Northern Harvest Rye. If you have any interest in that video, I encourage you, please go and click somewhere on the bottom and have a view of that other one. I think it turned out pretty well. But, to get more to the point, what I would like to do right now is cover the distiller a little bit more to add just that extra little bit of value to these whiskey reviews. I find I like to make reviews that are like the ones that I like to watch. And the ones that I like to watch aren't just where you get some jerkwad sitting in his garage drinking whiskey. I like to know about the nuances of the whiskey and about the production and the way it's made and things like that. That's just the way I am. And I do it anyways. I'm going to look it up and I'm going to research. And so I figured if I'm going to sit down and do the videos, I may as well pass on a little bit of that information that I've collected to you, the viewer. So, Crown Royal. Crown Royal was first conceived as the company exists today in 1939, and it was a way for the Canadian public to give something back to the Jolly Queen of England. Her and her hubby at the time were hopping across the pond to come have a visit to the colony, and we wanted to give them something nice to drink. So Crown Royal was founded, whiskeys were produced, everybody had a drink and a good time, and things were merry. From there on out, they've been producing spirits in some form or another since that time in 1939, and though they are operated in Canada, the distillery, it is an official Canadian whiskey, the distillery is here, it is made and produced, barrel-aged in Canada, but the actual owner of it is a large multinational corporation, which I believe is based in Scotland from my recent research, and they're called Diageo. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm not warning you off. I just like people to know. I think it's a good thing to know. So Crown Royal has 5 standard offerings. Northern Harvest Rye is one of them. I've already covered that in a previous video. They have this one, Crown Royal Black. Northern Harvest Rye is brand new for this year. This one was produced, I think, in 2012, 2010 or 2012. This one is also fairly new. And both Crown Royal Black and Northern Harvest Rye are bottled at 45% alcohol, a little bit above the 40% that is standard for most Canadian whiskeys, and I would probably imagine that has something to do with a little bit of a push from Diageo. They seem to be steering their Canadian portfolio investments towards innovation, changing things up, doing things in the whiskey world at least a little bit differently to try to get a bit more attention. And in the case of Northern Harvest Rye, it seemed to have worked. But this is also a fair whiskey. It's pretty good. The one thing that kind of, I don't want to say irks, but kind of irks me about Crown Royal is the fact that they aren't, and they aren't the only ones, they aren't as open and transparent as I would like about some of their, some of the nuances of their spirits. If you go and purchase something from a lot of these small batch distilleries, micro distilleries, they're very upfront about all the different things that go into the whiskey. They tell you about all the different grains that go into the whiskey, and sometimes they even go as far as to give you a bit of a description as to the percents of one grain to another. Now, that's not mandatory in Canada. In the States, I think it's a little bit different. You need to have a mash, what's called a mash bill, and that tells you, again, the percentages of all the different grains in the whiskey. I don't even care so much to have a mash bill. It would just be nice to sort of know what comes what, almost like an ingredients list that you would get on any other sort of food or beverage that you've purchased, just like on pop. It tells you exactly what's in it. That's all that I'd really like to see with Canadian whiskeys, is to start to see exactly what is in it. So it's bottled at 45. It has a beautiful color, as you can see. See if I can get the light through there. It is quite appealing. I really do like this color, and the distillery says that it is due to the very heavy charring that they do on the oak barrels before the young spirit is put into it to mature. Now, I'm sure that that has a lot to do with this dark color, but I'm also fairly confident that with a color that dark, there is a little bit of that caramel E150A colorant in it. Now, that's fine, but I'm getting to the point where I'd like to know. If it's in there, I would just simply like it to say that. There's also, this is getting into a bit more of an anorak topic that I likely won't cover too much on this channel, but there's different filtration processes. The most common one, it seems, today is chill filtering. It would be nice if on some of the Canadian whiskeys they would start to say whether or not it is chill filtered and things like that. For now, chill filtering, Google it. There's all kinds of stuff on the internet. It'll take me, I'll go on forever. So, the few things that they do tell us about Crown Royal Black is that it is a blend of 50 whiskeys. 50 different whiskeys go into this bottle. The oak barrels are heavily charred. It is, again, 45% bottling alcohol volume, and other than that, it's just your standard Canadian corn, rye, barley blend. I can just assume that's pretty much what's in every Canadian whiskey, usually going corn, then rye, then the smallest amount is normally barley. I have taken the liberty to pour myself a dram already, because I've noticed, again, I'm new to this, just like I'm sure a lot of you are, and I am not a whiskey blogger, I am not a whiskey aficionado in any way. I'm just a dude with a fondness for facial hair and a liking of spirit. I didn't even know I had one until I started drinking it and appreciating it a bit more. But, just as I feel all of you should, you do develop preferences, I've noticed. And one of the things that I like is I find that I do like to pour my glass out and let it actually sit for 10, maybe even 15 minutes, which in the scope of these videos, even though I do like to pour on camera, for this particular one, I appreciate it more when it's been out for just a little bit to allow it to breathe. So I poured this one previous to the fact. I have not added any water to this yet, though, but we will get to that. So, Crown Royal Black. Cheers to my father and his health. So the nose is, it's fairly standard, which is not a bad thing for a Canadian whiskey. You definitely get vanilla, something like molasses, a definite note of molasses, oak, and a little bit of subtle spice. Now, I find this just on its own in the glass is actually a little bit underwhelming. It's not very pungent on the nose. Maybe a backing of, you can smell almost some kind of alcohol, but I wouldn't say it smells like just pure grain spirit. It smells almost like rum, very much like rum, I would say. So let's, as we can see there, we've got some distinguished legs on the side of that glass, likely due to the higher alcohol content in the bottling. Should bring more flavor with it if the literature stands up, sure. I do have to admit, this is a bit different of an experience when I compare it to when I'm sitting on my couch and often doing my tasting notes. Because it's so bloody cold out here. And because it's so cold, some of the flavors that I had in previous tastings are going to be a little bit different. And I can already tell just from that first sip. Things are a little bit more subdued. Now, I've done research. I'll probably do a separate video on this, but I've done research into the effects of food temperature and taste. I've also said before, I am a strong believer in people should drink what they like, however they like it. If you're a mixer, please mix. If you want to do rye and Coke, rye and ginger, things like that, go ahead. I think all the power to you. If you are an on the rocks kind of guy, then add in your ice or your whiskey stones. I say cheers to that. And if you are a whiskey and water sort of person, that's fine too. I'm finding it's very interesting just to try different ways. The one way that I don't do anymore is I don't mix with things like Coke or ginger ale or anything anymore, just because I don't like the sweetness of it. I've sort of cut extra sugar out of my diet. And so I'm not a pop mixer anymore. But the one thing I can say for this, for sure, is it needs some water for me. On the back of the bottle, it has an interesting description. And one of the key phrases in the description is robust. And yeah, you can definitely say it's robust. So I just have a little glass eyedropper. I try to avoid plastic when it comes to things like this. And I'm adding 3 milliliters, which is, I think, about a little more than a quarter teaspoon, maybe a third teaspoon, so not a lot. That's a lot nicer to my palate. So spiciness. Really, really, really spicy. Robust, bold, slight hint of vanilla at the offset on the tip of the tongue. But then I find everything just sort of curls over the side, and then I get intense ginger. Something very, very strong like ginger, white hot pepper, and then it kind of lulls back to something like a cinnamon or a nutmeg kind of spice. There's also maybe even a little bit more on the finish. There's some kind of a hint of dark fruit, maybe fig. It's hard to say, but I feel confident in saying dark fruit, oak. There's a definite oakiness to this. It's really flavorful. If you yourself, or if you know anyone that always says that maybe Canadian whiskeys don't have enough pep to them, don't have enough flavor, they just all taste sweet and boring. Well, this one is, it definitely has a subtle sweetness. I wouldn't say that it's off-putting, but this one has some definite flavor. Most certainly. There is an interesting spirit note to it, but I find that the spirit note, when mixed with the spice, it reminds me of almost rum and eggnog, which sounds kind of weird, but something like rum and eggnog. And then the finish on the palate, I've heard someone else describe it as like a rum-soaked Christmas cake. The way that I see it, and I don't want to always equate these to desserts, but I'm kind of on rolls. So where I've said other ones have been like a dark Christmas cake or something like a creme brulee, this is a really peppery ginger snap. That's what I would say about Crown Royal Black. Is there anything that I've missed? Pepper, ginger, oak, sweetness, hints of raisin, something like raisin on the finish. Again, the dark fruit, almost like fig. Not quite fig, though. Almost heading towards something like a sultana or a raisin. There is a little bit of a citrusy note to it, especially in the middle of the tongue after you've kind of swallowed something like orange zest. Definitely not orange juice, but orange zest. The water does really help to open it up, though. Makes it a little easier to taste. I find if I don't add the water, it's a bit of a punch in the taste buds. But your mileage may vary. You may have to add a little bit more. Maybe you can drink it straight. That's fine. It's good. I don't know if this definitely wouldn't be my favorite sipper. My father is not a sipper. My father is a mixer, and I would give this my stamp of approval as a fine mixing drink. It is really, really robust, really strong, so it would not be outdone by something like Coke or ginger ale. If you added this, if you made a Ryan Ginger or Ryan Coke with Crown Royal Black, I don't think you would be disappointed as to not tasting the spirit. This would definitely be able to punch its way through, even with the sweetness. So it's pretty good. It's not bad. I add water. It's strong. It's got pep. It's got kick. If that's what you're looking for in a whiskey, then please go for it. If you like something that's a little more refined, a little more aged, or something like that, then maybe think about giving this one some caution. See if you can try it at a friend's house, or maybe try it at a bar or something like that. See if you can get them to put it in a glass and sip it, and see what you think. It's not the cheapest whiskey out there. It is about $31.95, I think, right now at the LCBO. That's here in Ontario. So that's not bad. It's also not super dear. It's kind of middle of the road. But that's all for today. I have jabbered on more than I had intended to. I hope that you all have a well and prosperous new year. Cheers. Beardly Gentleman out.